Ladies and gentlemen, the geopolitical chessboard of the Middle East has shifted from land-based maneuvers to a high-stakes maritime standoff that threatens to decapitate the global energy supply. As of mid-March 2026, the rhetoric surrounding the Strait of Hormuz has reached a fever pitch. While Donald Trump declares that the strait is his, Tehran's strategic response suggests a much more lethal reality, that the strait is, in fact, mined. This is not just a play on words, it is the latest and most dangerous twist in the ongoing conflict. The Strait of Hormuz remains the world's most critical choke point, with a massive volume of global oil sitting behind its narrow gates. Iran understands that it does not need to litter the entire passage with thousands of explosives to achieve its goal. Even a small, strategic layer of mines is enough to convince international shipping conglomerates to steer clear, effectively paralyzing the region. However, the situation remains shrouded in the fog of war. While there are unconfirmed reports that a thin layer of sea mines has already been deployed, direct evidence remains elusive. In this atmosphere of extreme uncertainty, the psychological impact of the threat is as potent as the mines themselves. Trump insists the passage is safe for transit, yet the reality on the water tells a different story. Only a handful of vessels attempt the crossing each day, and the tankers currently in the area are facing a harrowing ordeal. We are no longer just looking at lines drawn on maps. We are looking at a battle of mines in seas, where the invisible threat beneath the surface dictates the flow of global capital. This opening phase of the maritime war introduces a counterintuitive strategic problem for the Iranian regime. Tehran's primary objective is to exert absolute control over the strait, yet by mining it, they risk losing the very control they seek to project. Unlike naval drones which offer a selective lethality, mines are indiscriminate. Once laid, they do not distinguish between an enemy destroyer and an Iran-friendly tanker. This creates a bridge-burning scenario. Once the explosives are in the water, the path to peace becomes significantly longer and more costly to navigate. As we begin this 8-part investigation, we will dissect the mechanical and political complexities of this blockade, exploring why the threat of mining may be more useful to Tehran than the act itself, and how the United States is struggling to fill a critical gap in its own naval capabilities. At the core of the naval standoff in the Strait of Hormuz lies a profound strategic paradox. Iran wants to control the flow of global energy, but by deploying sea mines, it effectively abdicates that very control. To understand this, one must analyze the mechanisms of war termination. In any conflict, the endpoint is often dictated by the party that possesses the unilateral ability to stop the fighting. For instance, if the Kremlin were to order a total retreat of Russian forces to their internationally recognized borders, the conflict in Ukraine would effectively cease, as the international appetite for an offensive into Russian territory would likely vanish. In the current theater, the United States holds a similar finger-snap capability. It could choose to end its strikes at any hour, provided its regional partners are no longer under threat. However, Iran's approach to ending the war is mired in unrealistic diplomatic posturing. The president of Iran has demanded 3 preconditions: the recognition of legitimate rights, the payment of war reparations, and firm international guarantees against future aggression. These demands are widely viewed as non-starters in Washington. Beneath this rhetorical surface, the reality is that the United States is the primary driver of the war's pace, while Iran is the party that desperately needs it to end. The central strategy of modern warfare is to convince the adversary that peace offers rewards while continued conflict offers only escalating costs. By mining the strait, Iran is attempting to raise the costs for the United States, but this tactic is akin to burning a bridge. Mining is a non-discriminatory act of bridge burning. While a physical bridge can be rebuilt with time and capital, a sea minefield cannot be undone by a simple diplomatic apology. If Tehran litters the choke point with explosives, the process of demining will take months, if not years, of specialized maritime operations. Counterintuitively, this makes the continuation of the war less costly from the American perspective in the short term. Since the strait is already de facto locked down by Iranian threats, adding mines does not significantly increase the current level of disruption. Rather, it merely guarantees that the disruption will persist long after a ceasefire is signed. This removes Iran's ability to offer a quick return to normalcy as a bargaining chip, thereby increasing the United States' bargaining leverage. Furthermore, Iran itself remains a victim of its own geography. The Islamic Republic needs the Strait of Hormuz to function for its own limited exports and essential imports. Naval drones, such as those used effectively by Kyiv to drive the Russian Black Sea Fleet away from Ukrainian shores, would be a far more rational tool for Tehran. Drones allow for selective lethality, the ability to target specific tankers, while allowing friendly vessels to pass, and more importantly, the ability to stop the attacks instantly once a deal is reached. By opting for mines instead of drones, Iran has chosen a weapon that lacks a stop button. They've traded tactical flexibility for a blunt instrument that may ultimately trap them in a cycle of isolation from which there is no swift or easy exit. As the threat of a mined Strait of Hormuz becomes the central axis of the conflict, the focus shifts to the United States' ability to neutralize this underwater menace. The Pentagon's strategy is divided into two distinct phases: proactive limitation and post-laying mitigation. Proactively, the goal is simple: destroy the mine-laying platforms before they can deploy their payloads. This mirrors the US approach to ballistic missiles and drones, where the preference is to eliminate the threat at the source rather than intercepting it in transit. However, this is easier said than done. Iran can distribute its mine inventory across a vast fleet of small, nondescript civilian vessels and fast attack craft, significantly increasing the number of precision strikes required before the United States can declare the waters under control. The internal criticism of the US campaign suggests that the Pentagon may have been slow to prioritize the anti-mine layer portion of the operation. While keyboard warriors point to 18-month-old warnings, the reality of military logistics dictates a strict order of operations. First, U.S. sorties must target Iranian anti-aircraft systems to ensure air superiority. Second, they must neutralize the most proximate threats, ballistic missiles and naval drones that can strike a target within 1 hour of an order. Only then can the focus shift to Iranian ports and the diverse array of boats capable of Rai-Thu-Loy. Donald Trump has claimed that just about all of their mine ships are gone in one night. Yet as long as a single civilian craft can carry a handful of mines, the psychological and physical blockade persists. The most alarming aspect of this crisis, however, is Plan B, the mitigation of mines once they are already in the water. Despite a defense budget approaching $1 trillion, more than double that of China, the United States Navy faces a staggering deficiency in dedicated minesweeping platforms. The era of the wood-hulled Avenger-class mine countermeasure ships is effectively over. Only 4 of these specialized vessels remain in service, with decommissioning dates scheduled for 2027, the US Navy phased them out in favor of the Littoral Combat Ship LCS, a jack-of-all-trades system that has proven to be an inadequate substitute for a dedicated minesweeper. Unlike the wooden Avengers, designed to have a low magnetic signature, the LCS platforms struggle with the time-consuming and complex task of reconfiguring for demining operations. The aerial alternatives are equally precarious. The MH-53E Sea Dragon, a specialized mine-hunting helicopter, is aging and dwindling in numbers. Its intended replacement, the MH-60S Seahawk, faces significant questions regarding its reliability in sustained demining environments. Because the United States rushed into the Iran operation to capitalize on domestic protester momentum within the country, many of its limited minesweeping assets remain out of position. This capability gap reveals a dangerous vulnerability. The United States can project massive power to destroy a rival's navy, but it lacks the specialized tools to clean up the aftermath. This deficiency forces Washington into a corner, making them reliant on a resource they have long undervalued, their European allies. The deficiency in American minesweeping capabilities brings a harsh spotlight onto the structure of the NATO alliance. For decades, the United States has viewed NATO primarily as a network for forward operating bases, an unsinkable aircraft carrier in Iceland, or a buffer of ground forces in Poland. However, the naval crisis in the Strait of Hormuz reveals a different side of the alliance: the necessity of niche specialization. Countries like Belgium and the Netherlands have maintained centers of excellence for mine clearance, possessing the dedicated wood and fiberglass platforms and technical expertise that the Pentagon traded away for more aggressive power projection systems. Under normal circumstances, the United States could simply free ride off this European expertise to clear the waters. However, the Iran War of 2026 has generated deeply mixed feelings across European capitals. While Germany remains a vocal supporter of Washington, many other European leaders view the conflict with trepidation, fearing the war soup of uncertainty it injects into the global economy. This has created a classic entrapment scenario in alliance politics. Entrapment occurs when a powerful patron, in this case the United States, induces its allies to participate in a conflict they would have preferred to avoid. Because Iran did not technically initiate this war, Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, which limits collective defense to defensive wars, cannot be easily invoked. Yet, the physical reality of the strait remains. Europe needs the oil markets cleared just as much as Washington does. Iran may be inadvertently pushing the alliance toward a consensus by targeting NATO non-combatants. As Iranian missiles continue to threaten international shipping, Allied forces already in the region, such as the French aircraft carrier currently in the eastern Mediterranean, are being forced into defensive actions. If a NATO vessel is struck, the motion toward invoking collective self-defense becomes an inevitability. Even without an official stamp of approval from the North Atlantic Council, individual nations may soon bite the bullet and deploy their minesweepers to the Gulf. For Europe, the economic interest in stabilizing oil prices outweighs the political distaste for the conflict. The irony of this situation is profound. By dismantling its own minesweeping fleet to fund more bombs, the United States has essentially forced its allies into a position where they must provide the cleanup crew for an American-led war. Whether through direct military aid or the eventual economic necessity of reopening the strait, Europe is being drawn into the vortex of the Hormuz blockade. The United States may have successfully entrapped its partners, passing on the staggering costs of maritime restoration to the very allies who wished the conflict had never started. The mine strip has become a trap not just for tankers, but for the diplomatic cohesion of the Western world. While the threat of sea mines serves as a powerful psychological deterrent, the actual deployment of these weapons reveals a critical lack of operational flexibility. To achieve a more precise and sustainable dominance over the Strait of Hormuz, the cold eye of strategic analysis points toward a different technology: naval drones. As proven by Kyiv's forces in the Black Sea, asymmetric naval drones can drive a superior traditional fleet far from a nation's shores, effectively creating a no-go zone without permanently contaminating the maritime environment. For Iran, opting for drones over indiscriminate mining represents the difference between a surgical tool and a blunt instrument. The primary advantage of naval drones lies in their selective lethality. Unlike a mine, which lies dormant and reacts to any hull that crosses its magnetic or acoustic threshold, a drone is an active, directed weapon. This allows Tehran to dictate exactly who is hit and who is spared. During the opening weeks of the conflict in 2026, direct evidence emerged of Iran utilizing these drones to target specific Western-aligned tankers, while simultaneously allowing a handful of friendly vessels to transit the strait. This level of granular control is impossible with a minefield. Drones allow Iran to maintain a trickle of economic activity with its few remaining partners, while maintaining a total blockade on its adversaries. Furthermore, the use of naval drones addresses the critical issue of war termination discussed earlier. A drone campaign can be halted with a single encrypted command, instantly reopening the strait once a diplomatic deal is struck. A minefield, by contrast, requires a months-long, dangerous, and internationally subsidized demining effort. By utilizing drones, Iran retains its most potent bargaining chip, the ability to turn the lights back on for the global oil market the moment its demands are met. The mining strategy effectively burns the very bridge Iran needs to walk across to escape the war's economic devastation. However, the shift to drone warfare is not a perfect solution for the regime. While drones offer better control, they are also more vulnerable to the proactive defense strategies of the United States. Unlike a mine hidden beneath the waves, a surface drone can be detected and destroyed by the superior ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities of the American and Israeli forces. The Pentagon has consciously prioritized anti-drone and anti-missile defenses, recognizing that these platforms are the more proximate threat. Therefore, Tehran finds itself in a strategic vice. Drones offer the control they need but are easily destroyed, while mines offer the permanence they desire but destroy the very control they seek to exert. In the theater of the Hormuz blockade, the United States military does not strike randomly. It operates under a rigid and clinical hierarchy of destruction known as the Order of Operations. Critics and keyboard warriors often complain that the Pentagon was slow to address the Iranian mine-laying vessels, but military logistics dictate that certain doors must be kicked down before the house can be cleared. The first priority is always the suppression of enemy air defenses. Until Iran's radar networks and surface-to-air missile batteries are neutralized, the United States cannot fly the volume of sorties required to maintain persistent surveillance over the strait. Once air superiority is established, the second phase targets the proximate threats platforms that can deliver lethal strikes within minutes of an order. This includes mobile ballistic missile launchers and naval drone ground control stations. These are prioritized over mine layers because a drone or a missile is an active threat to American sailors and regional partners in real time. Only after these high-velocity threats are degraded does the Pentagon turn its full attention to the Iranian ports and the diverse fleet of small craft capable of dropping mines. The strategic challenge for the United States lies in the asymmetric distribution of Iran's mine-laying capacity. Unlike a traditional navy where a few large ships carry the entire payload, Iran can distribute 2 or 3 mines to hundreds of small, civilian-looking boats. This labor division forces the United States into a massive expenditure of precision-guided munitions to clear a single coastal area. Donald Trump claimed in early March 2026 that just about all of their navy is gone, but this assessment overlooks the thousands of DHOWs and speedboats that can still function as improvised mine layers. The Pentagon's delay in starting the anti-mine layer portion of the campaign was a conscious decision based on platform availability. Even with a massive budget, there are only so many aircraft and destroyers that can be in the air or on the water at any given hour. By prioritizing the head of the snake, the command and control centers, the United States hopes to paralyze the decision to lay mines before the boats ever left the docks. However, in the chaotic environment of the Strait, even a partially successful Iranian effort has created a blockade that the current US fleet is ill-equipped to resolve without turning back to the very order of operations that initially pushed mining to the bottom of the list. The persistence of the mining threat in the Strait of Hormuz has forced a cold realization upon the global markets. The cleanup phase of the Iran war may be more economically devastating than the combat phase itself. As we navigate the complexities of mid-March 2026, the financial burden of clearing the world's most vital energy choke point is beginning to manifest. While the United States can afford the bombs to destroy a navy, the fiscal and political cost of a months-long demining operation is a different calculation entirely. Every day the Strait remains closed or unconfirmed safe, global oil prices experience a violent upward surge, acting as a massive, unintended subsidy for energy exporting rivals, including Vladimir Putin's Russia. The cost of demining is not just measured in dollars, but in time to market. Standard maritime insurance premiums for tankers in the Gulf have spiked by over 400%, rendering many shipping routes commercially unviable, even if the US sets. Navy provides a theoretical escort. The political cost is equally high for the Trump administration. While the president insists that the navy of the enemy is gone, the persistence of even a few dozen unrecovered mines creates a veto power over the global economy held by a defeated nation. This creates a perception of strategic failure. If the world's most powerful military cannot reopen a 33-mile-wide passage, the limits of American hegemony are laid bare for all to see. Furthermore, the long cleanup serves as a primary driver for the entrapment of European allies. As oil inventories in Europe reach critically low levels, the political distaste for the war in capitals like Paris and Rome is being outweighed by the sheer necessity of survival. The United States is effectively passing the bill for the war's aftermath to NATO partners who possess the specialized minesweepers such as the Belgian and Dutch forces. This creates a jagged diplomatic friction. Europe is forced to provide the expensive, dangerous labor of clearing the mines to fix a crisis they believe was exacerbated by Washington's go-it-alone approach. Ultimately, the mining of the Strait has turned the conflict into a war of attrition, where the winner is saddled with a trillion-dollar liability. For Iran, the strategy is a desperate attempt to ensure that if they fall, they take the global economic order down with them. For the United States and its allies, the challenge is to manage a recovery process that is currently estimated to take anywhere from 6 to 18 months. The mined Strait of Hormuz is no longer just a tactical hurdle. It is a financial black hole that is reshaping the alliance structures of the Western world and testing the patience of a global population already reeling from the war soup of 2026. The final strategic evaluation of the 2026 Hormuz crisis highlights what many analysts describe as the irony of entrapment. By the time large-scale combat operations against Iran's command structures had largely concluded, the most persistent danger in the region was no longer missiles or naval vessels, but the silent presence of sea mines scattered across the world's most important maritime choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. For decades, this narrow passage between Iran and Oman has served as one of the planet's primary energy arteries, carrying a significant portion of global oil exports from the Persian Gulf to international markets. When the conflict escalated, the mining of these waters created a long-term strategic challenge that proved far more complicated than the initial naval confrontation itself. From a purely military standpoint, the United States achieved many of its operational goals. Coalition forces neutralized much of Iran's naval infrastructure, degraded command networks, and limited Tehran's ability to conduct conventional maritime operations. Yet modern naval warfare often leaves behind a dangerous residue. Sea mines, relatively inexpensive, difficult to detect, and capable of disabling even large vessels, can remain active long after fighting stops. Clearing them requires slow, painstaking work by specialized vessels and divers, often over months or even years. This is where the strategic paradox emerged. Over the past 2 decades, the United States Navy had invested heavily in advanced strike capabilities, aircraft carriers, long-range missiles, and unmanned systems, while gradually reducing parts of its traditional mine countermeasure fleet. These specialized ships, designed to locate and neutralize underwater mines, were fewer in number than during earlier eras of naval strategy. In contrast, several smaller European navies had continued to develop highly specialized expertise in mine clearance. As a result, the task of reopening safe shipping lanes increasingly depended on cooperation within NATO. Nations such as Belgium and Netherlands have long maintained advanced mine hunting capabilities, including vessels built with non-magnetic hulls and sophisticated sonar systems capable of detecting mines hidden on the seabed. These fleets, sometimes overlooked during high-profile military campaigns, suddenly became indispensable in the aftermath of the conflict. The geopolitical symbolism was striking. For much of the post-Cold War era, the United States had been viewed as the primary guarantor of maritime security, ensuring the free flow of global commerce through strategic choke points. Yet the aftermath of the Hormuz crisis suggested a more collaborative reality. Reopening the strait required multinational coordination, shared technology, and contributions from allied navies, whose niche expertise proved critical. European governments, many of which had initially preferred to avoid escalation in the region, ultimately faced a practical dilemma. The economies of Europe and indeed much of the world remain deeply tied to stable energy supplies from the Persian Gulf. If shipping through the Strait of Hormuz remained disrupted for long, energy prices could surge and supply chains could suffer severe consequences. In that sense, clearing the mines was not simply a favor to Washington, it was a matter of protecting the global economy. For Iran, the use of sea mines represented a classic example of asymmetric strategy. Mining operations are relatively inexpensive compared with maintaining a modern navy, yet they can impose enormous costs on an adversary. Even a limited number of mines can force major powers to slow or halt shipping until safe routes are confirmed. Historically, naval mines have caused more ship damage than many other naval weapons combined. However, such tactics also carry long-term political risks. The indiscriminate nature of sea mines means they threaten not only military vessels, but also commercial shipping from many different countries. When a key international waterway is affected, global pressure to restore safe passage intensifies rapidly. Over time, multinational coalitions typically form to neutralize the threat and ensure that trade routes remain open. As the long cleanup phase began after the crisis, international naval task forces gradually expanded their presence in the Persian Gulf. Mine-hunting ships, underwater drones, and specialized divers worked methodically to map contaminated areas and remove explosive devices. These operations rarely attract headlines, yet they represent one of the most technically demanding aspects of naval warfare. At the same time, the crisis accelerated discussions about diversifying global energy routes. Governments and companies began investing more aggressively in alternative pipelines, strategic reserves, and renewable energy sources to reduce dependence on a single maritime choke point. While the Strait of Hormuz will likely remain vital for global energy flows, the shock of the crisis highlighted the vulnerability created when so much of the world's supply passes through such a narrow corridor. The strategic lesson emerging from the conflict is therefore broader than the outcome of any single battle. Military success in high-intensity combat does not automatically translate into stability afterward. Clearing mines, rebuilding infrastructure, restoring shipping confidence, and stabilizing markets can take far longer than the conflict itself. The aftermath becomes a test not of raw firepower, but of coordination, patience, and international cooperation. In that sense, the Hormuz crisis of 2026 illustrates a central principle of modern geopolitics. Tactical victories must be followed by strategic recovery. Without the ability to secure trade routes and rebuild confidence in global systems, even the most decisive battlefield success can leave behind a world struggling to restore normalcy. As tankers cautiously resume their passage through the Gulf, escorted by multinational mine-clearing fleets, the episode stands as a reminder that controlling the aftermath of war can be just as important as winning the war itself. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where our program comes to a pause. Please leave your thoughts in the comments so we can continue the discussion together. And if this is your first time watching, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive the earliest notifications of our upcoming videos. Goodbye, and see you again soon.